over the last few months, I've seen a lot of reports from people having issues with their chargers. Now, as a result of this, I decided to do a bit of investigation into the state of chargers and FPV, and this rabbit hole hasn't half got deep. I decided to set up a special area on my Discord where people could talk about their experience with various brands and chargers, but I've also spent some time talking to retailers in the UK, the US and others off the record about their experience with various brands, but also the types of chargers that they sell as well. As a result of all of this, I've put together a set of things that I think will help you get the best possible experience when buying an FPV charger. We are going to talk today about the experience with certain brands. We're going to talk about the kind of chargers that you should consider buying and the ones to avoid. And we're also going to talk about parallel charging as well. Now, just to be crystal clear before we get into this, I am not affiliated with any charger power supply brand. I have reviewed chargers from Toolkit RC and others. I am not, though, going to avoid saying what I think about any brand. We are going to be saying some good and, frankly, some bad about some of these as well. My thoughts are entirely my own, but I am going to be talking about things based on my own experience, but also the things that I have been told from others as well. Now, before we get into talking about the chargers, I want to talk about this thing, and this is a parallel charging board. It allows you to connect up to 6 Lipo batteries in parallel and connect it to a single output charger. Now, I know there are thousands of people out there who use these on a daily basis without any issues. However, I cannot recommend anyone uses a parallel charging board, period. There are lots of different types of parallel charging boards out there. You've got cheap ones like this without protection. There are others, like you see from these here, that do have built-in fuses. However, none of these are absolutely safe. Whilst a fuse is going to give you a little bit more protection, it is not going to stop a battery going up in the worst case scenario. I'm also disappointed by some of the wording used by some brands, things such as this safe parallel charging board labeled here from Lumineer. This does have additional protections, there's no question about this, but they basically imply this is the safest way to parallel charge your battery. Whilst that technically might be the way, it might be the safest, it doesn't mean it is safe. It has protection built in for plugging in different cell counts. It has protection built in against incorrect plugins, but it doesn't have protection if you have 2 cells with completely separate voltages. And as a result of that, this is being sold as the safest way to parallel charge, but none of them completely remove the risk that parallel charging brings. And it is my opinion that these should never ever be used. The increased risk is just not worth the hassle, and you are far better getting multiple single output chargers or getting yourself a 4-port charger or 2 of them rather than using one of these boards. You may have used one of these all of your life without incident, but one day something will go wrong and it will increase the risk of a fire dramatically, and as a result of that, it is my opinion that all of these should be deemed relics of the past and no longer used. Now, when it comes to chargers and the types that are available, there are 2 main differences on most chargers. You have DC only or DC and AC. DC only, like this one here from ISDT, simply takes a DC input. You will either need to use it with an external battery or a power supply to power the charger and thus charge your batteries. There are also direct AC/DC versions available as well. So for instance, chargers like this little Toolkit RC, this has an AC input and it has a DC input, allowing you to use either. Now, there are many people who like to buy chargers like this with the AC input, but what I can say in all of my investigation is this is one area that you do need to be careful of. Now, in all of my investigations, the one thing that kept coming up was avoid AC and DC chargers because the AC side failure is extremely common. This actually aligns with my own experience. So for instance, this Toolkit RC power supply, you can see there's a wire coming out the back because shortly after I reviewed it, the AC power supply in it actually blew up. It went with a bang. I have talked about this on the channel before. And also this smaller M7 AC charger that Toolkit RC sent me also blew up on the AC side, completely out the blue. It still works on the DC, but you can see that I have had to cover the AC there. Now, what you will have noticed in recent times is there's definitely been an increase in the number of AC and DC chargers, but there are still many of the models available in DC only. So for instance here, if we look on your FPV, they've got AC/DC in the Sky RCs. If we go over to Hobby RC, you can see you've got the Hota D6 Pro, which is a dual channel, which is AC/DC. You've got the F6, which is DC only. And then they've also got the F6 Plus, which is an AC version. Whilst you may think getting the AC version will be handier, the truth is you are much better sticking with a DC only charger and using an external power supply or battery. That way, if the AC side fails, you still have a good fully working charger. Many of the brands out there actually sell their own power supplies. So for instance, you can see here, there are Sky RC power supplies, 380 watt. You've got Toolkit RC make power supplies. You've got the P200, like I showed you earlier, which has already blown up. And there are others. I do not recommend, though, you go with any of these power supplies and instead build yourself a quality power supply based on a cheap server supply that you can get on eBay. If you search eBay for server power supplies, I've specifically searched here for HP ones because they're quite a common one. You can get yourself a high wattage AC to DC power supply for under £20 in the UK, $20 in the US. You can see here we can get a 750 watt PSU for $14.95. What we're actually going to do later on in this video is get one of these in. I've actually ordered it already and I'm going to show you about doing the modification. It's really simple mod to basically tell the power supply to turn on when you power it up. The thing to take into account with these server power supplies is they are designed to be used for thousands of hours continuously. They're designed to be highly reliable. Many of them have a very high amperage 12 volt output, which is perfect for what we need in FPV. Now, if you didn't want to go as far as doing a build on a server power supply, something like a good used quality laptop power supply is also worth a look. If you search eBay again for laptop PSU, there are loads of used power supplies with about 150 watts of rating available for under £20. All you would need to do on one of these is cut the plug off the end, put an XT60 on it with the right polarity, and you're good to go. If you want something really high wattage, up to 750 watts or more, 70 amps, you want to go with something like the server power supply. However, if you don't need that much, something like a used laptop power supply here, which you can get for under £20, $20, is also going to be better than one of those power supplies from those other manufacturers. Now, at the end of the video, we'll take a look at doing that server power supply mod. So if you want to do that, please do make sure you hang around. I'll also put a timestamp for that one in as well. Next, though, we're going to talk about brands. And this is the part where I continue to get myself removed off people's Christmas card lists. Now, there is zero question, having spoke to users, having spoke to retailers, that there is one brand specifically where we seem to see more issues than others, and that is Toolkit RC. Now, Toolkit RC are a brand that I have reviewed on the channel before. I actually have a few of their chargers here. I also have a few ISDTs as well. There are obviously other brands available on the market. You've got Hota, you've got Sky RC, which I've got here as well. And you've even got older chargers like this old Turnigy Reactor 300. I have had this for years, and this is the most reliable charger that I have ever had. Unfortunately, though, when it comes to reliability, Toolkit RC are at the bottom. I have personally experienced multiple failures on Toolkit RC products. That thing blew up. Although I do have a couple that haven't, but I haven't actually used them on AC that much. When you search social media, there are just so many reports of issues on Toolkit RC. varying from things such as the charger actually blew up, blew a track, blew an IC. You've got do not buy reports out there. And you even had Cyclone FPV who did a live stream where they opened 10 chargers and all 10 were actually faulty. JB spoke about this on the news 3 years ago. You've also got various social media posts around issues with chargers doing things like going on fire. And it is just, without doubt, more posts around Toolkit RC charger issues than any of the others that I have seen from any of the other brands. It is worth understanding though, whilst Toolkit RC are one of the most common ones with issues, they are probably the most popular charger on the market today as well. So as a result of that, you are going to see more reports of issues. They are certainly though not alone in having issues. For instance, the SkyRC B6 Neo, I had this for review and it's been absolutely perfect, but I am aware that some people have had issues with this as well as the other SkyRC chargers. The Hota F6 that you see here is meant to be a fantastic charger. However, that Plus version that I spoke about earlier is apparently extremely unreliable. Again, the AC power supply that's built into it failing. I haven't used that many ISDG chargers. This is my own one, which I've used for about 2 years, the P10, and it's DC only, and this has been fantastic. But the overall consensus is, whilst most of them do fine on DC, AC is the problem, but that doesn't mean that there aren't issues on the DC side on other brands as well. And overall, what we have is a market full of products that really do have quite suspect quality. No question, looking through reports online, looking through YouTube, looking on everything, that Toolkit RC appears to be the brand that has more quality control issues than pretty much anything else. Very common failures appear to be the AC boards blowing up, that being the power supplies like this or the chargers. If you scroll through social media, there are reports after reports of issues, and right now they are just not a brand that I can recommend on this channel. They did reach out to me a short time ago to ask me to take a look at one of their new chargers, and I simply didn't respond because I can't honestly sit here and review something that I don't know if it's going to last in 3 or 6 months' time. What's even more worrying is you have dealers who are not willing to deal with them anymore as well. It is just a real shame that Toolkit RC do not seem to be able to get on top of their issues. It definitely seems batch related. What I have seen is some people say some of their older chargers that came off the production line that were DC only were fine, but there is no question at times that there are batches of chargers from them that simply do not work as they should. And as a brand, they are one that I am going to have to say, just avoid. Stick with one of the others that are out there. Now, as for what charger do I recommend you buy? Well, first of all, as I've said, DC only. ISDT have always been good for me. My P10 that I've got here, this is a 2-output charger, has been one of the main chargers that I've used on the channel for the last couple of years. In fact, I've got a couple of these. They offer great performance. They're quite small and compact. You can toss them in your backpack if you want to. And they're cheap enough that you can get a couple of them rather than use that parallel charging board. I have had zero reliability issues with the ISD P10s, so this is one that I can definitely recommend. Another that was recommended to me, and I bought this in for this video, was the Hota F6. Now, specifically the F6, not the Plus. The Plus is the one with the AC. That is unreliable. The Plus is not the one to go for. The F6 is the one that has just the DC input, and this is apparently, according to many users, one of the better chargers available on the market today. Now, the nice thing about the F6 is that it is a 4-port charger, so you can charge up to 4 batteries at the same time. It also has some additional functionality on it as well. It's got USB for updating. It's got DC power supply function, power delivery port, USB, as well as servo tests as well. And you can even configure this to be a power supply if you want to as well. It's got 2 fan outputs on the back to keep it cool. And it also has a little stand down there as well. Now, I've only just started using the F6, so I don't have a personal recommendation on this with regards to reliability, but I do have it from very good sources that this is one that many do recommend. These are the 2 that I would suggest you consider looking at right now. Another one that I've used a lot is my little Sky 6B6 Neo. This is in my bag. I use this as my portable charger. My one has been absolutely fine, although I am aware a few people have had issues. Now, there are obviously lots of different chargers available on the market, and I can't comment about every one. It is somewhat luck of the draw, but these are the 2 that I'm going to personally go with today. As I said earlier, one of the best external power supplies to use with your DC charger is actually a server supply. As I showed you on eBay, they're available for as little as $20, £20. And what I'm going to show you next is how to actually convert one for use on FPV charging. So here is the power supply that I ordered from eBay. I paid just under 20 quid for this. It is an 800 watt supply from HP, 12 volt output up to 67 amp max. Now, this is a server supply, so it takes a traditional kettle or 3-pin plug on the input, and then it has these PCB connections on this side here. Now, when you do a search online, you will find that a lot of these do have pinouts available. We have our positive on the big copper pad here, our negative on the big copper pad here, and then we've got some data pads and some power pads over here, and it's the same underneath. Now, to be able to power this up, we need to do a small modification. It isn't hard. We need to just connect a few of the pins together. Now, on the screen is showing you what you need to do on this power supply. This was actually located on RC groups, but the very basics are you simply need to connect these 3 end pins together. Now, you can just bridge this with solder like I've done here, or alternatively, you could put a switch on it. If you look at the diagram, it says connect the 3 together. What you actually would want to do if you want to do a switch is connect pin 2 and 3 together and switch that in to pin 1. Though if you bridge it like this, it will power up as soon as you plug it in. When we do that, you should see the little power LED come on. And if we now check this with my multimeter, so we're going to go onto the big pad there and the big pad there, you will now see that we are getting 12.3 volts out from the power supply, and that is ready to use. So what I'm going to do now is solder on a couple of wires onto these pads here and put an XT60 on it to allow me to plug it into our charger. Okay, so there we go. We have our wires soldered onto the power supply, and then we have a cable down to an XT60. Now, you could 3D print something to go over the end here, or you can tape it. You do need to cover this at minimum because you do have 12 volt on the bottom of these as well. You could just mount it somewhere that it's not going to touch anything. I would strongly advise covering this up though. To finish mine off, I custom designed this 3D printed end, and I've also now added a switch. If I just pull this back to show you inside, what I did was I designed this end cover with some grill holes at the front, a hole down the bottom here big enough to allow the XT60 to go through, and I also then added a little round switch up there, and you can see that I made a slight change on the pin out where we have the switch. So now you have the end pin which heads off to the switch, and that comes back then and is connected to pins 2 and 3, and that basically allows me to turn it on and off when in use, and that then simply slides over the top. What I'm actually going to do is just pop a little screw into the side, or I might use a bit of glue. I haven't decided yet. I might even tape it, but this just gives a bit of a nicer finish. And there, that gives us quite a nice professional looking power supply for our chargers. Okay, so just to summarize a few things before I wrap this one up. It is a very murky world, the world of chargers and power supplies in FPV. Avoid AC is my strongest advice when it comes to buying a charger. Get yourself a DC, whether you're going to use a car battery, a vehicle battery, or build yourself a power supply like this, or even buy one of the power supplies many of the manufacturers make. I'm a little dubious on recommending that final point, just because if they can't make a power supply work properly in a charger, are their standalone power supplies going to be any better? But at least if it's two separate items and you have warranty, it's not the whole thing that's going down. My personal recommendation, though, is to build yourself something like this, a nice 800 watt power supply that's going to suit you without any problems, and then get yourself a nice DC charger. With regards to the brands, as I've said, on the DC side, I've been using Hotter and I've been using ISDT, and both of them have been fine for me. Actually, most of the Toolkit RCs have been okay on the DC side as well. It's predominantly the AC side that has let go. Although, as I have said already, I find it very hard to personally recommend Toolkit RC just based on the amount of issues I've seen. But I have to be completely fair in saying they probably sell more chargers than anyone else out there. So if they sell more are going to fail. However, I don't like some of the failure that I have been seeing. Final note on parallel charging, I don't care how safe the board says it is, how many fuses it's got, whose name is on it. I do not recommend you ever use a parallel charging board. Just get yourself multiple cheap chargers. I know it costs money. It is cheaper to buy 3 or 4 chargers or 4 chargers like I've got on that Hotter than it is to replace your home, your workshop, and all of your FPV gear. It is simply not worth the risk using a parallel charging board. Now, that's it from me on this one. I hope you found this video useful. I'm really interested in knowing your thoughts. Please do put them down below. Any feedback on chargers, any comments on anything I've missed as well. And finally, I just want to say, if you have found this video useful, please do consider checking out the links to my Patreon as well as buying me a coffee. It is only through the support of my patrons I'm able to keep making content on this channel. And if you'd like to support us to allow us to make content in the future, please do consider checking it out. I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who supports this channel. I would not be able to continue to do this without your support. Anyway, that's it from me. Stay safe. I will speak to you soon.